Hello and welcome back to the Conversation Cabinet.
Today we have Jacob Rees-Mogg. Quite a fantastic episode. So Jacob, first question just to start it off is, what do you think is the largest issue facing our country at the moment?
Oh, it's economic. If you think in the last couple of days, the Leader of the Opposition, the Leader of Reform and the Chancellor have all made special interventions to talk about the economy. And there are lots of other things that tie into this, including immigration, which people are very concerned about, energy policy, which people are very concerned about. But it is that people feel less well off than they did, and they see no prospect of getting better off. So that's at the heart of political discussion at the moment.
But where do you see the solution lying? Is it with, obviously you're a conservative, I think you believe in some quite liberal policies. Is it the free market? Especially after Liz Truss's mini budget, I think people are quite avoidant of that kind of economics. So where should we be looking?
Well, there's a really simple point, which is that the government, HM government, taxpayers have almost never paid more than 38% of GDP in tax.
Mm-hmm.
But government expenditure is running at 45% of GDP. That is a 7% gap, which is nearly £200 billion a year that we are spending, not more than we're currently receiving, but more than we are likely to receive. And therefore, what you've got to do is cut spending. And where I think Liz's mini budget went wrong was that it had the tax cuts before the spending cuts, and you need to do it the other way around. We need to shrink the size of the state, and we need to do what the state does better. So what does this entail? It entails looking at welfare and indeed looking at the NHS to see how money is spent there, because you can't save £200 billion if you exclude welfare and health.
Someone from Labour might say that, investment is necessary, or higher tax even for the next budget is necessary to make sure that we actually have enough money to spend on public services and things like that. But is that what we need to do? Is for you, is that not the right thing to do?
Well, so two things about this. One is governments don't invest, they spend. This is Gordon Brown's spin when he turned government spending into investment. Investment is when you put money into a pot and you expect to get a return for your pension or something like that. Government spends money and it's gone. And when it says it's investing in education, that's theoretical. There's no return. There's no income flow that comes from it. So it's playing with words. Governments do not invest in that sense, almost never. And the other point on that is that money's been spent very badly. So the NHS keeps on getting more money year after year. Every government gives it more money. The only government that ever cut its funding was the Labour government of 1974 to 79, because it ran the economy so badly it ran out of money and it had to cut the NHS. But the decline in productivity in the NHS since 2019 means that we are spending an extra £35 billion simply to get the same outcomes as we got in 2019. That's not 35 billion that's improving the NHS. That's 35 billion to keep the NHS static because of productivity failures. So no, simply spending more money won't improve how the country operates, and it's not investment.
It's interesting you spoke earlier about the fault of the mini budget was the order. Because I've heard personally Liz Truss say that it was the fault of the Bank of England in her relation to that. What do you think of that?
Oh, well, it was quite clear that Bank of England bungled at the same time, yes. The Bank of England Monetary Policy Committee met to determine interest rates. The Federal Reserve had just put interest rates up by 0.5 point. Inflation was running out of control. And the Bank of England bungled it. It put interest rates up only by 0.25 point. And that had a very strong effect on sterling. Even the Bank of England has admitted that 3/4 of the decline in government bonds and in sterling was its responsibility, not that of the mini budget. So that's absolutely right for Liz to say that. The Bank of England has been stunningly badly run in recent years.
Talked about the productivity of people across, especially in the NHS. How would productivity be improved in that scenarios? And obviously, it might have to be inherently financial, either through like like pay rises or tax decreases. But is that really possible in the current world we live in, where productivity could be more money based than is anything else?
All I'm talking about at the moment is getting productivity back in the NHS to where it was in 2019. It could be done in 2019 with the existing structures. That's not changing pay, that's not changing facilities or anything of that kind. It's using what is currently there simply as efficiently as it did 6 years ago and would save £35 billion. So there's an extraordinary amount of productivity that is easily there. When you talk about longer term productivity, that is a more complex issue. And how do you do that? That does relate to structures. It relates to your use of technology. It will relate to AI. It will relate to how you incentivize people in the NHS. Currently, the NHS is incentivized not actually to see patients. It's run for the producer interest, not the patient interest. And that needs a fundamental reform.
Do you not think that Labour getting rid of NHS England is a good start?
It's a great start, but have they got rid of NHS England?
Pardon?
Have they actually done it?
No, but I think they're in the process of doing so.
Are they? Are they? Are you sure? I mean, they've announced it, but just because the government's announced something doesn't mean that it's going to happen. Apparently, the NHS needs £1 billion to wind up NHS England, and the Treasury isn't giving the NHS the money to do it. So it's been announced. Great policy. NHS England is a pointless bureaucracy, and I believe in ministerial accountability, but it's not happening because of the cost of winding it up.
Do you not think such big policies like getting rid of such a huge chunk of bureaucracy take a bit longer? And that's obviously why they haven't done it yet.
It's not the complexity of doing it. It's simply that they haven't got the cash and the Treasury isn't giving them the cash. So there's an internal government row going on about whether they can do it or not. It's to some extent, I understand the Treasury's position because the Treasury is very sceptical of the spend to save argument. You hear the spend to save argument the whole time, and you very often find that you do the spend and you don't get the save. And so that's where the Treasury starts from. But actually setting up NHS England, which was a policy of the coalition, was a mistake.
For these kind of issues, it could be also contextual, but then, for instance, like COVID, but then also due to how the government was run. So would you think that if, for instance, Liz Truss's governance was a bit more successful or Rishi Sunak had a bit more time in governance, do you think we'd be in a very different position talking about NHS right now, or do you think it would be quite similar?
Look, I think the Tories got ourselves into terrible muddle by the changes in leader, and that distracted that distracted from governing. And when you have changes in ministers and you have change of prime ministers, things stop happening for a period. The civil servants don't just grind on because you've got no direction, you've got no set clear policy agenda when you're changing Secretary of State the whole time. So I think that caused real problems and delayed changes. And equally importantly, neither Liz Truss nor Rishi Sunak had a mandate from the voters, and difficult decisions need a specific mandate because otherwise people run into difficulties and backbenchers get very nervy and you don't get your policy through.
I mean, you just made quite a bold claim about a bit of a conservative accountability there of how they haven't done as well. And I've seen you went to the Reform conference and showed a bit of interest there. I'm just very curious, how much are you favouring reform at the moment?
I want to unite the right. I want the right to come together because I think we agree about a great deal. I agree with both what Kemi Badenoch says and what Nigel Farage says. They're very, very similar. And really importantly, what Nigel said this week about the economy was a serious contribution to economic debate rather than an opposition party that was never going to get elected coming up with a wish list. So reform's becoming more serious about economic policy. The Tory party's long been serious about it. I think reuniting the right, depending on how you wish to phrase it, is the essential policy.
How do you think uniting the right actually looks like in practice? Does that mean a coalition? What does that really mean?
It's a very fair question, and we've got some time to go before the general election. There are various options. We could have the sort of informal coalition that Labour, the Greens and the Lib Dems had at the last election, where they didn't target every seat in the same way. So in some of them the Lib Dems went, in others Labour, and in one or two the Greens. They weren't normally up against each other. Where they did, they fought each other thoroughly. You could have that type of informal coalition, or you could have something along the lines of the 1918 coupon election, where the two party leaders decide which candidate they will support in each seat. That would be more than what I would prefer. I'd prefer a more formal agreement, but I don't think you need to settle it 3.5 years before an election.
If we were to unite the right, I think, 46% of current Conservative supporters would wish Robert Jenrick as Conservative Party leader, and he seemed to be quite heavily sceptical about the idea of collaborating with Reform UK. So do you think this possibility of these two parties coming together is actually a feasible idea, if the more popular leader at the moment, who isn't actually the leader of the party, is saying, I'm not really sure about it?
Well, first of all, Robert isn't the leader of the Conservative Party.
Yeah.
I mean, I backed him to be leader, but that didn't happen, and Kemi is the leader. And the other thing is, think back to the 2010 meeting in the garden at Downing Street, where the press come and see David Cameron and Nick Clegg. And throughout the election, they've said rotten things about each other. And Cameron is asked, I think the question is, didn't you say that Nick Clegg was the biggest joke in British politics? And Clegg pretends to storm off in a huff and said, did you really say that? It's where you can look it up, and it's quite fun to watch.
It's a funny video.
Until parties come together, they have to say they're not coming together. It's like in the old days, we've been talking a lot about Jim Callaghan devaluing the pound in 1967. You don't say it's even possible to devalue the pound until you do it. Because as soon as you say you're doing it, you're indicating that something's changing. So I can say it because I'm on the sidelines, but neither leader can say it until it's done, until it's agreed.
Do you not think that promoting the idea of, or saying that parties act in a way that, they act as a rivalry before they become, they form a coalition, do you not think that almost reduces public trust if then they change once they're in a coalition and say, oh, we're friendly now?
It's one of the reasons I prefer first past the post to other systems, because I think post-election coalitions are fundamentally dishonest. Nobody voted for the coalition programme introduced after 2010. I'd voted Conservative, other people had voted Lib Dem for two very different programmes. And first past the post gives you much greater honesty and accountability because, in a way, all political parties are coalitions. But the deals are done before the election and are included in the manifesto. What happens with usually proportional representation, very unusually with first past the post, 2010 is the exception, is that the politicians decide it all afterwards and decide which policy promises they're going to cut up without so much as a buy or leave from the voters. So I think voters quite understand that the Labour Party and the Tory Party are quite broad coalitions, with quite wide range of views within them, but that they like to know that before they go to vote, rather than suddenly discovering that policy is being determined by a party that's come third or even fourth.
Even with this system, the mainstream parties of Conservative and Labour are seeing much less popularity, particularly in the polls. Do you think even in the next general election we could see a moment where a third party or fourth party could have more votes than someone like Conservative or Labour?
Well, you want to interview the very brilliant John Curtis, who will be able to explain all this to you much better than I can. But it is so interesting that you look at polls at the moment and you look at election results historically, and Tory and Labour used to get 90% between them. They're now bobbing about 30%. This is a real change in British political life. The question is, does it survive to the general election? It looks as if it will from here, that both parties are so unpopular. They've both got a very long way to go. And that really opens things up. And the Greens are doing well with their new leader. I mean, I think he's bonkers, but he's charismatic. I can't deny him that. Reform is doing exceptionally well with Nigel. What's important is the leader of each individual party. It's become very much a personality contest. But this has had a profound effect on the success of the historic two major parties. And that leaves British politics in flux and makes it very hard to predict what will happen over the next 3.5 years. But it's certainly extremely interesting. Dare I say, good time to be doing a podcast on these.
Yeah, possibly.
Why do you think that Zach Polanski is bonkers?
Well, look at his past career. His hypnotism. I mean, there's a sort of mesmerism was very popular in the Victorian age, but it rather fell out of fashion because it's basically a confidence trick. So you've got somebody as leader of party. And I know people say this about politicians anyway, but this man was a professional confidence trickster.
Oh, I think he's clarified on that he actually hasn't, he was asked by a reporter from Sun, I think, to do it, and he said no. I believe that's what he said on the Question Time to Zia Youssef, I believe.
Is that right? Not what it appeared to be at the time. He appeared to have it as a business, but people like correcting their past when it's embarrassing.
Do you not think it's more of like that's more of like an ad hominem to look at someone's past rather than their like political policy?
I think when we're in an age where, I think his policies are bonkers too, even more bonkers than his hypnotism. I think the whole green agenda is a disaster, ruinous, making people cold and poor. And he would implement basically hard left policies that would ruin the country economically. So that's far worse than his competence tricksterism. However, we are living in an era of individual politicians, individual political figures being what people are voting for. And therefore what the person is like really matters. It's also quite funny that that's what he did when he was a younger man.
Do you not think policies like, for example, a wealth tax could be quite favourable? You said that it would make people poorer. Do you not think that something like a wealth tax would redistribute wealth down to those at the bottom end?
Well, I'm not in favour of redistributing wealth.
Why is that?
Well, why should I be?
To help those in need.
But I'm in favour of people earning their living. I'm not in favour of stealing money from people who've made their money. Why should I do that? I don't believe redistribution is a good in its end.
Why?
Well, why should I? You explain to me why I should think this is a good thing.
Well, if you're redistributing wealth, it's almost like a utilitarian thing to do.
Why is that?
Because more people are benefiting than the 1% of the rich people.
How are they benefiting?
They're able
when you take away their incentive to work.
Do you think that even just a small amount, do you think that completely eliminates one's like
Well, how much are you taking away? If you're do you think that redistributing is an end in itself? Well, I think that's nonsense.
Right.
But put an argument for it. Why do you think this is a good thing?
I think it will benefit more people than it inconveniences.
In what way?
It means that more people have money in their pocket to deal with things like the cost of living crisis, and it means there's less
No.
burden on the government.
That's different. You were saying you believe redistribution is a good in its end, that redistribution of itself is a good thing. You want rich people to have less money. You believe in limiting the distribution of wealth. I'm not opposed to a welfare state. I'm in favour of helping people who can't support themselves. But I'm not in favour of an objective of making anybody poorer. It may be a consequence, but it's definitely not an objective. And a wealth tax is purely there to make people poorer as your objective. Because economically, in every country that's tried it, it's failed.
Taking the 1% off someone who has over £1 billion, do you think that will
why? Just because you're jealous?
No, but more because...
Well, why? Why do you want to? He's paying tax anyway. He's made this billion.
But they've got so much of a surplus, and there are people who cannot get out of poverty.
In what view have they got a surplus?
Well, if they've
how do you know they've got a surplus? What are their commitments? How many people are they employing?
Do you not think that they obviously these billionaires are making lots of profit now? Surely that, and a significant portion of that goes to dividends and.
Well, they may not be getting any dividends. People running tech companies may have assets of billions, but their income may be very small because it may purely be in the paper of the company that they have founded. So you're saying they should sell their shares to pay this tax when they've got no income or borrow money to do it. I mean, I just think it's absolute nonsense. And it's purely the politics of envy. You just don't like billionaires being richer than you. Whereas actually you should aim to be a billionaire yourself with your enormously successful podcast.
Do you not think the two can coexist? Someone striving to be like a billionaire and also believing in the redistribution of wealth?
I don't believe in the redistribution of wealth as an objective.
Fine.
That inevitably, in any tax system, rich people pay more tax than poor people. But I do not think it is a good thing to make anybody poorer. Now, I absolutely accept you need to pay for some public services and you need to pay for some welfare and some pensions and some degree of health support and all of that. But I absolutely reject the idea that it is a social good to narrow income inequality or asset inequality. I don't think that's true. I think it's something that has grown up as a progressive idea of the left that far too many people have accepted without examining why it is a good thing.
What if it was just almost like if we're focusing just at the objective is to get more money into the pockets of poorer people?
Okay, then capital taxes are completely stupid. Let me explain why.
Okay.
If you tax sales and you tax income, there is a cash flow associated with it. You go into a shop, you're buying something. If there is a 20% tax on it, that is part of the transaction you are carrying out. Now, there may come a point at which you find it's too expensive and you don't carry out the transaction, but by and large, you will carry on with the transaction. If you have income tax, you can't put it up too high, but even at 40%, it is in most people's interest to carry on earning than to stop working at 40%. If you have capital taxes, you lead to the misallocation of capital. Why is this? Well, if you've got a capital gains tax and you've made an investment, and the investment has a huge gain on it, if you then sell that and you pay 24% capital gains tax, let's, to ease the maths, make it 25%, you're then left with 75% of your original investment, if it's all gain. To get that back to 100%, you've got to make 33.33% profit before you're back to zero. So what do? You hold on to a bad investment, because unless you're confident that the new investment is super good, you won't even get back to zero unless it goes up by 33.33%. So that encourages people to leave money in stale assets that they should sell, move on from, etc. You then look at death duties. Death duties lead to all sorts of complex structures to minimize death duties that are not designed to promote economic growth. Why is it that if you invest in an AIM stock, you will, under Reeves reforms, pay 20% death duties, but if you invest in BP, you'll pay 40%. Well, BP is a very strong British company that needs capital. More people being able to buy its shares reduced is its cost of capital, makes it easier for it to invest globally. And yet, you've made it harder for people to invest in BP. That's crazy and harms the allocation of capital. But let's roll this further. If you are a 90-year-old and you've got an investment that is heavy with gain, you certainly won't sell it because it will face capital gains tax at 24%, followed potentially the next day by death duties of 40% on the remaining. So elderly people leave their assets unchanged, and they may stay, and this has consequences, they may stay in a house that's much too big for them, because if they've got more than one house, it's not their primary residence, it's subject both to capital gains and then immediately to death duties. So you misallocate capital, which has a real consequence for how people then live. So I'm very against capital taxes to start with. Death duties, wealth taxes are really problematic because they relate to an asset that may not be sellable. So if you tax somebody on a house and you tax it at 1%, people living in an expensive house do not necessarily have 1% of the value available in cash to pay the tax. So where do they get that money from? You can't sell 1% of a house. You have to sell 100% of the house to get the 1%. You may say they can borrow, but that has another cost attached to it. And that, again, is a very inefficient use of capital, because if banks have limited capital to lend, which they do because they have capital requirements to meet, if they're lending you money against your property to pay a tax, that isn't effective capital investment. That's turning capital into expenditure, which is economically desperately inefficient. So that's why capital tax is such bad taxes. It's why wealth taxes have always failed. And frankly, if you introduced the wealth taxes you were advocating, all the billionaires would leave. No billionaire would stay in this country. Why should they?
So what do we substitute in instead to the poor person that is might be listening or that's saying, right, I want more money in my pockets?
Well, if they want more money, they can jolly well work. I mean, if they want more money, that's the best way to get it. If they are disabled or have other problems, that's very different, and they need support. But the best way to afford that support is through income and sales taxes, which we have and which are overwhelmingly the major providers of taxation in this country. Those taxes are, I'm not saying I like income tax, I'm not saying I like VAT, but they are economically the most efficient because they create the least distortion as the money is collected to pay for what you've got to pay for.
It's almost like a necessary to make sure that people who aren't able to work can work, essentially.
Well, you've got to have the right incentives to encourage people to work, and welfare has to be generous enough to look after those who can't work, but not so generous as to make it a lifestyle choice.
Do we incentivize immigrants to work? To slightly shift the conversation.
Well, it depends whether they're legal or illegal.
If they're here legally?
If they're here legally, they are incentivized to work. Yes.
And illegally?
Illegally, they're not allowed to work in most circumstances.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
But that's a real problem, because the thing about illegal immigration is that the real problem is not small boats, it's overstayers on visas. And they are not allowed to work, but they almost all do. And they are the most likely to be exploited because they have no recourse. They can't go and complain they're not getting the minimum wage, because if they go and complain they're not getting the minimum wage, they get booted out of the country. So they carry on working, probably in difficult conditions. Likewise, their landlords have no incentive to make their properties decent because they can't get anywhere else because they're illegal. So there's a real problem for the visa overstayer himself, but also for the application of our visa rules, which are very, very lax.
Sorry.
Often these illegal immigrants often will work for things like Uber Eats or Deliveroo or kind of these delivery companies. Do you think in general it should be an incentive for these companies to say to these people that, you shouldn't be working here, or is it more part of the government's role to be stopping this kind of stuff?
I think as a general rule, it's for the state to enforce the law, not for individuals. When the COVID regulations were in full force, I was a member of parliament and I used to get letters from people trying to report their neighbours. I thought this was deeply unattractive. I don't think it's the job of each of us going about our daily lives to enforce the law. And I think it's a sign of government failure when it tries to get businesses to enforce the law.
When we asked you at the start of the podcast, what is the number one issue facing the UK? You said it's economic. How big of a role do you think immigration plays in the economic state of the UK right now?
An important one, I think the most important one is high energy prices.
Really?
But I think the second one is immigration. I think immigration has had the effect of holding down wages for the least well-off in society and underlies our productivity problem in the private sector. We've got a general productivity problem, not just in the public sector. Why do I think that? That immigrants, by and large, take on lower paid jobs, mass migration, small number of immigrants working in the City of London and so on. They don't really matter. They're not sufficiently large numbers. They outcompete the domestic labour force when they come over for low-priced jobs. Why? Because actually the people who have travelled hundreds of miles to come in a country where they speak another language are usually very driven.
Yeah.
And they're doing entry-level jobs that are usually done by people who are moderately driven, and indeed people who may have been let down by the education system and so on and so forth. So they outcompete at the entry-level job. In terms of productivity, they discourage companies from investing in capital equipment. Why? Because you've got cheap labour instead. And there's always a balance between capital and labour. If labour is very cheap and capital is relatively expensive, you keep on using cheap labour. I made myself very unpopular with the National Farmers Union by saying that if we need imported labour to pick fruit, we should be growing wheat. Because wheat you can harvest mechanically. And you should grow fruit in countries where the people already live and their labour is already there and is cheap. And actually, if you pay British people enough, they will pick fruit. You just have to pay them a lot more than you have to pay people who are coming from very poor countries. And our comparative advantage is not in growing fruit. Our comparative advantage is in things that are more technologically sophisticated.
Companies will always make the decision to choose between capital or labour. Obviously, whatever's cheapest usually.
That's absolutely right.
Yeah. Do you not think that companies choosing cheap labour brings down prices for the consumer? Do you not think that's quite a good thing if we can get cheap labour from immigration?
Well, it doesn't improve the standard of living for the consumer because the consumer also needs to be earning money and you have a poorer economy overall. So we've seen GDP grow, but we've seen GDP per capita decline in recent years because we've been taking on more cheap labour. So the overall economic effect is actually damaging. And capital investment massively lowers prices because it increases productivity. And the best way to lower prices is not through low wages, but is through high productivity. And how do you get high productivity? You get high productivity through capital investment. And it's really interesting that if you look at Japanese nursing homes, and we're always told you have to have cheap labour in nursing homes. They don't in Japan. They have expensive labour in Japan. But they're much more productive because they have innovated with AI, they've innovated with remote monitoring, they've innovated, even some computer games were developed for Japanese care homes that are now played by school children in England. It was absolutely fascinating. And that has made them more productive. Then they can afford to pay people more. Then those people have a better standard of living. So there's a virtuous circle in capital investment, which there isn't really just in cheap labour. Cheap labour is okay if you're an emerging economy and you're at that very first stage of development and you've got an enormous workforce that you need to get basically off agricultural production into manufacturing.
Yeah.
But that's the very early stage, and we're long past that in this country.
In about 2.5 weeks, Rachel Reeves has not come out and said we're not going to raise taxes. From your perspective, do you think this next budget is going to be detrimental, or can you see some level of positive that will come out of it?
Well, last year, she said very clearly that she wasn't going to raise taxes this year. So you're quite right to say at the moment she's saying something very different, but this is already quite a big U-turn on where she was a year ago. Last year's budget did extraordinary damage to the British economy because they thought that taxing business was a free lunch. And they discovered that it wasn't, and that the increase in NICs for employers has led to decline in employment and an increase in inflation. And this has been very bad economically. And so I have a nasty feeling that this year will be even worse because they will double down on their mistakes.
In terms of the success of small businesses in this country, obviously it will be influenced by the budget. Going back a few years to Brexit, which I know you're a very strong advocate for, do you think that is or has any role in the reason why small businesses are struggling at the moment? When was it 61% of Britons in the UK, according to YouGov, say it was a mistake? Do you not think it must be some relevant?
Well, I wouldn't go too heavily on the opinion polls.
Of course, no one.
The opinion polls said that Remain would win consistently. But no, our trade is up. Not in manufactured goods, of course, but in non-manufactured, in services, our exports have been doing extremely well. Our purchases from the EU have gone down a little, and there have been some accounting differences. So a lot of goods came in to the UK and then went on to the EU, and they were counted as UK exports to the EU. And what are these? These are things that we simply didn't produce, or mangoes and things like that. So yes, our mango exports to the EU have gone down, but they were never real, if you see what I mean. We weren't growing the mangoes. Even in the beautiful microclimate we have in Somerset, that is the model of perfection, is the veritable Garden of Eden. We don't grow many mangoes. So if you leave out those effects, actually our trade has done extremely well, particularly on services. What's been the problem with manufacturing industry? Nothing to do with Brexit. It's all to do with energy prices, that we have decided to destroy our domestic manufacturing base on the altar of really stupid green policies. That's why British Steel is closing down. That's why the British car industry is being massacred. It's because of loony green policies.
Some of those green policies, I think quite a few people advocate for because they could be inherently cheaper in the long run, obviously.
Especially solar panels.
But they're not.
Yeah.
I mean, they've been saying this for years, and there's no evidence for it, and all the supply is intermittent, and they use dodgy accounting, because for every solar panel you have, and for every wind farm you have to have a gas station on standby for when the wind isn't blowing and the sun isn't shining. And that actually is particularly true in the winter. So you have lots of solar panels producing virtually free energy in the height of summer. What are we doing with all that? Well, nothing. We have to dissipate it because it's of no use. When you get to the winter, there are only a few hours of daylight, you don't get much, and you need the gas-powered stations on standby. And that's extremely expensive because you put all the capital cost of the gas stations on the short period they're running rather than over 365 days of the year. So on that basis, you say, oh, well, solar panels are very cheap. No, they're not, because they need this standby power, which becomes inherently inefficient. If you run the gas stations 24 hours a day, 365 days a year, that's when you get the lowest price energy.
I'd just like to ask a couple of questions that we've been received on our poll.
Yes, from your fan base.
Indeed,
fan base, yes.
Exponentially growing. Do you think that the Conservative Party should move towards and embody more Christian values? Because I know you're a devout Roman Catholic.
I'd divide that question up, actually. I don't think party politics should be religious, but I do think this is a Christian country and that the values that underpin it are Christian. And the other thing I'd say is that as a matter of government policy, regardless of religion, it's important to support the family, which hasn't happened in recent years. And I think we have made a mistake in not having an active family policy, not least because our birth rate is declining, and that is a problem. But also the outcomes for children are clearly better when they grow up in the nuclear family rather than when they don't. And you see this in terms of prison population, in terms of crime, in terms of academic achievement, in terms of prosperity during people's lives. And therefore, I think it is a sensible objective of government policy, regardless of one's religious objective, to support the family.
You said that, obviously, about nuclear families. Do you not think that's quite like a sweeping statement? And also, you said earlier about a limited state. And,
yeah, look,
that's kind of intervening with people's personal preferences.
So first of all, it's statistically true. So people may not like this, and they may think it's old-fashioned, but something like 50% of the prison population were taken into care. Under 1% of the actual population are in care. There's something that goes very badly wrong, and the figures are obviously not quite so bleak on broken homes, but they are still always worse than people who have been in a family that has stayed together. And that's important, and you want to provide the best opportunities. You're absolutely right to pick up the contradiction between the state not interfering and the state supporting the family. What I'd say on that is that current policies are actually anti the family. So you get more benefits if you don't live together. You get better tax breaks if you don't live together, with the exception of death duties. That is the mistake, in my view, is that not only do we not have pro-family policies at the moment, we have anti-family policies. And that, I think, is quite wrong. It's also become very divisive by economics, that by and large, better off people get married and less well off people don't. And the reason for that is primarily economic. So I'm at least calling for levelling the playing field.
What is your dream cabinet role, and what were the 3 policies you'd enact if you were?
That's an impossible question to answer, but I found being in office was extremely rewarding, being involved in making decisions, not always decisions that one liked, but being part of that. And I enjoyed all the cabinet roles that I held, but I'm now not even a member of Parliament, so I think to talk about getting back into the cabinet is a little bit premature.
This is quite a good question, actually, because it's relevant to what we discussed earlier. If there was a general election today, who would you vote for? You said you support Kemi and you support...
I would vote Conservative. I would unquestionably vote Conservative.
Unquestionably, okay. I think I've seen a few people online question that, so it's good to clarify.
I'd vote Conservative. Might even vote for myself.
Are you going to try again in the next election?
I'd love to have another shot at it, but time will tell whether that's a realistic ambition.
Should we ask this final one?
Yeah.
So the final question from a good friend of ours is, how good is Nanny's marmalade?
Oh, fantastic.
Really?
Nanny let you in, so that was Nanny.
She's very nice. She's a lovely lady.
You should have asked her for some of her marmalade.
That's true. Quick sample.
We may have run out at this time, because it's made when several oranges come in February-ish, and I have a nasty feeling by November there may not be a lot left.
Lord Johnson, a friend of yours, he made some lovely homemade apple juice.
Right.
Very nice. I don't know if you've had some. Fantastic.
No, I haven't actually. We turn all our apple juice into cider, which we're actually going to be doing this weekend in Somerset.
Very nice.
Lovely. Wow.
Should
we end it there?
Yeah,
it's 7:33.
Perfect.
Awesome. Well,
5:33.
Thank you all for listening.
It's not. You had me worried there for a moment. If it's 7:33, I should be at GB News.
What are you doing there today? Are you just being on panel?
No, I'm doing my usual program. So I do a program Monday to Thursday, 8 till 9. Actually, had I thought about it earlier, one or other of you could have come on, because
That'd be quite cool.
we needed somebody to talk about the change to school policy, and we
That'd
wanted
be
somebody.
fantastic.
Is it too late?
It's too late because we've got it fixed up. But
Shame.
but I've now got your. Are you basically in London, or are you?
I'm in
Ethan
London,
is-
so I'm very easy to.
I'm on the south coast, but it's a very easy commute.
I think if you organise it, I think it should be a very easy thing to do.
Yeah.
Okay, we must.
Should we probably stop recording it?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
but we must.
Jacob
That would
Rees-Mogg,
be
thank
great.
you very
Thank
much
you.
for being
No,
with us
no,
today.